Brain. The brain consists of 3 parts. The forebrain controls all thoughts, senses, motor functions, emotions, and hunger. The midbrain controls auditory and visual reflexes as well as awareness. The hindbrain controls coordination and analysis of senses. Brains have a similar texture to tofu. There are 100,000 miles of blood vessels within the brain, enough to circle the earth 4 times. The ancient Egyptians believed the brain's function was to produce snot. Though the brain only makes up 2% of the body's weight, it uses 20% of the body's energy. A person's brain has 100 billion neurons. These cells are known as the gray matter, which process information. Einstein's brain has been preserved for study. It is split into 240 separate slides for viewing. 89.06 is the percentage of people who report normally writing with their right hand, 10.6% with their left, and 0.34% with either hand. More electrical impulses are generated in one day by a single human brain than by all the telephones in the world. After age 30, the brain shrinks 0.25% in mass each year. The brain can stay alive for 4 to 6 minutes without oxygen. After that, brain cells begin to die. The fact that people use only 10% of their brain is a myth. Humans use 100% of their brains. The composition of the brain is 77 to 78% water, 10 to 12% lipids, 8% protein, 1% carbs, 2% soluble organics, 1% inorganic salt. It is currently impossible to measure the possible storage potential of a brain. A professor at Northwestern University suggests that if a human brain was converted into a hard drive-like device, it could store 2.5 petabytes of data. That equals more than 500,000 DVDs or 100,000 Blu-ray discs.
When we're making orange juice, a strainer filters out the pulp, making sure that only the juice goes into the glass. Well, our midbrain is also supposed to act like a filter, making sure that our cortex only pays attention to what's important. However, if our midbrain isn't up to par, then all kinds of stuff can flood the cortex. Clothing tags, sock seams, fabrics, background noises, papers on our desks, and more, all which our brain shouldn't even notice, compete for attention. And then, when people tell us to focus and concentrate, the real question is, on what? While all this is going on, our cortex is thinking,
hey, I don't know what to do with all this stuff. It's not my job to filter out what's important and what's not.
So, we gotta do something to make sense out of all the chaos. Little guys might actually start screaming. They're smart. They're creating white noise, like parents who use a vacuum cleaner to calm a crying baby. Except now the screaming drives everyone else crazy. Some of us are more subtle with our white noise. We may just hum all the time. Or we might keep a running dialogue under our breath.
Okay, today when I get to school, I need to write my name on my paper. I didn't do that yesterday. And then I need to write the date. What's the date?
When the midbrain isn't doing its job, people think we're impulsive. And they get really annoyed when we're always grabbing and touching things. It doesn't matter if someone takes away whatever we're fidgeting with. We'll just find something else to touch. With an underdeveloped midbrain, we tend to love big old bear hugs, but we dread light, unexpected touch. We often complain when someone brushes our hair.
Ow! Stop! That hurts!
And we're happy as can be just wearing a t-shirt and shorts in cold weather. There's more. Since our brain may not get the message that we're full, we tend to think about food a lot. And we might have trouble shifting from one activity to the next. If we're told to stop and move on to something else before we're ready, we can get really frustrated. Or we might get stuck on a simple thought. For example, suppose our dad tells us that we're going to get ice cream right after the basketball game. But just as we're about to leave, Granny calls and needs help with her backed up sink. If we're midbrain stuck, it often goes like this.
Hey, bud, Grandma called and she needs our help, so we're going to go get ice cream tomorrow, okay?
No, but you said we'd get it today.
I understand I said today, but Grandma needs our help, so we'll just get the ice cream tomorrow.
No, but you said we'd get it today after the game.
Yes, I did, but that was before Grandma called and said she needed our help, so we'll just get it tomorrow.
And we'll keep repeating whatever thought is stuck in our head over and over again.
I understand. I originally said today.
It's like a gear that's spinning round and round, and we just can't get off to move on to the next thought. We also have trouble getting started on homework and projects, so people think we're not organized or focused when we fall behind. Such is life with an underdeveloped midbrain. And since we look like everyone else, most people have no clue what we're dealing with all the time. But it doesn't have to be that way. We can go back and finish developing our midbrain, and when that happens, it's really easy to become a champion.
The border between two parts is here. This part is called the tectum, and this part over here ends close to this dark structure called the substantia nigra, and this part is called the tegmentum. The part ventral from the substantia nigra is called the crus, cerebral crus. The tegmentum and cerebral crus together are called the cerebral peduncle. So we had the tectum, tegmentum, and the cerebral crus. Now in tegmentum, you can notice that it has a shape something like this. If you look at from behind, from this perspective, you would see 4 round bodies. Those bodies are called the caliculi. They are divided into superior ones and the inferior ones. So we have the superior caliculi and the inferior caliculi. And if we make a cut over here, you would see 2 superior caliculi, just like they are illustrated here. Those 2 upper caliculi are important for vision and vision reflexes, and the lower caliculi are important for sound reflexes. Now in tegmentum we have the red nucleus, and the red nucleus is a structure that is involved with the motor coordination. The tegmentum itself contains the motor neurons, and these motor neurons are called the reticular formation. So this over here was the red nucleus. This over here were the superior caliculi. This over here was the central gray stratum. And this over here, this structure, is the cerebral aqueduct. It is a tiny canal that connects third and fourth ventricle. This canal over here, this aqueduct, is what separates the tegmentum from the tectum. So we have the tegmentum over here and the tectum over here. Now let's get back to the crus cerebri. This over here, this part, and this part is the crus cerebri. It contains only the ascending pathways. It contains the efferent tracts. There are 4 of them. One over here is the temporospinal tract. Another one over here is corticospinal. Then comes the corticonuclear tract. And the last is the frontopontine tract. And at the end, I would like just to point out 2 things. This over here was the interpeduncular fossa. That is the place where the oculomotor nerve leaves the brain. Now, on Earth,
So the midbrain is your superior and inferior colliculi. This is your superior colliculi, and this is your inferior colliculi. Your superior is used for vision. Your inferior is used for auditory. And then your midbrain also includes your pons, which is right here, and this is for respiratory. And then it includes your medulla oblongata, which is not on this, but it is for respiratory and for cardiovascular.
And then here it is on this model: superior colliculi, inferior colliculi, pons, and your medulla oblongata.
And then just on this one, just in case, this is going to be your superior colliculi and your inferior colliculi, the pons and the medulla. On the cerebrum, the lobes that you have to know, this is going to be the frontal lobe, this is the parietal lobe, the temporal lobe, and the occipital lobe.
What side of the brain?
This is going to be the right side of the brain.
Okay.
And you can tell because of the cerebrum, it goes in the back, and because of the mitten thing. Mm-hmm. Do you want to go through gyruses?
The auditory center in the brain, shown above in red, is concerned with hearing. Although shown here on the outer surface of the brain, most of this area lies within the temporal lobes and is found within the surface of the cerebral cortex on both sides of the brain. The auditory pathways begin in the nerve fibers of the organ of Corti in the inner ear, where sound waves are converted to nerve impulses. These impulses travel in the auditory nerve to the auditory cortex of the brain. During their passage to the auditory center, some of the auditory nerve fibers cross in the brain stem. This results in the sound which enters one ear passing to both cortices. The impulses are relayed in the lateral lemnisci, and from there, via the medial geniculate nuclei, to the auditory cortices in the temporal lobes of the brain, where sound is perceived.
So the anatomy of this reflex looks like this. When light enters an individual eye, it stimulates retinal ganglion cells. The impulses travel up cranial nerve to the optic nerves, which are the axons of those ganglion cells. Note that the optic nerve and subsequently the optic tract axons project bilaterally into an area of the midbrain immediately adjacent to the superior colliculi that's known as the pretectal nuclear region. And then, as you see in the diagram on the left, the pretectal nucleus neurons then project bilaterally to the preganglionic parasympathetic neurons that are found in the nuclei of Edinger-Westphal, which are also situated in the midbrain. So the Edinger-Westphal nucleus, containing those preganglionic parasympathetic neurons, then project out to the ciliary ganglion that's not shown in the diagram, and the postganglionic parasympathetic neurons then go to innervate the constrictor of the, or sphincter of the pupil, causing pupillary constriction or miosis.
A brain tumor, or tumor, is an intracranial solid neoplasm. A tumor, defined as an abnormal growth of cells within the brain or the central spinal canal. Brain tumor symptoms. The visibility of signs and symptoms of brain tumors mainly depends on two factors: tumor size, volume, and tumor location. The moment that symptoms will become apparent, either to the person or people around him, symptom onset, is an important milestone in the course of the diagnosis and treatment of the tumor.
Primary brain tumor symptoms are usually identified by neurological symptoms or pain. This can be headache, sometimes neck pain, nausea, vomiting, just a feeling of being not quite right cognitively. This is usually subtle, just not quite fully right with your cognitive abilities. And it's often wouldn't necessarily even be recognized by other people, though it can be, but it certainly would be recognized by yourself, and that you just don't feel quite right. It can also present with symptoms related to where exactly the tumor is located. If it's located in the area that controls motor function or visual function or your language, it'll affect that area directly with noticing decrease in your vision, weakness in an arm or leg or both, or difficulty with speech. There can also be seizures associated regardless of where the tumor is located, and then occasionally there'll be hormonal problems. For example, if it's a pituitary tumor, you can present initially with just the changes of the hormones being affected at the pituitary gland. The cause for brain tumors is still somewhat unknown. This is in contrast to lung cancer, where we know that smoking is a very definitive and defined risk factor for the development of lung cancer. The development of brain cancer still today is largely unknown. There are some genetic conditions and environmental factors which will contribute to the development of brain cancer, but it's much less defined than the development of other cancers in the body.
Well, meningiomas are typically benign, slow-growing tumors that arise from the membranes that line the skull and cover the brain. They're actually fairly rare. Each year, only about 2 in 100,000 people will be diagnosed with a meningioma. They typically occur in older people in their 40s to 70s, and more common in women than in men. If the tumor can be completely removed surgically, then the results are very, very good, and the likelihood it will come back is small. On the other hand, tumors that are under the brain, arising from the base of the skull, typically surgery can't remove all of the tumor, and then we need to use radiation treatments such as radiosurgery, and the success rates there are very good. The average person doesn't need to be worried about whether they have a meningioma since they are so rare. But if you do have gradually progressive neurologic symptoms, then you really ought to go to your doctor and perhaps get a scan.